All right, welcome everyone. It is that time. It is the grand finals. Antirad versus Sweety. Both players coming off of dominant 3-0 performances in their respective semifinals. I am Scorch13. Joining me again is Atmaz. Atmaz, are you ready for this one?
Hello, everybody. Yes, I am. I've been waiting for this 3-0, 3-0. Both of these players in the semifinals. We're gonna see Yellow Rush against basically Combat Burn, which it looks like he's gonna go right to the face with it.
Yeah, now Sweety's Yellow Rush does play a lot through these Sagittarius like we saw in his semifinal, so a little bit more of a defensive, maybe kind of a mid-range style. So Antirad can't play the defensive like we saw him go for in his matchup against Yellow Rush in his semifinal. So we'll have to see if he goes for the aggressive play or that defensive, making an early read off of what Sweety's doing.
You know, I say Anti-Rad's going to go for the face, but now that I think about watching his previous matches, he almost always opens this way with this particular deck. You know, mid-range usually, for the most part, opens to the right and then pushes up a lane. But he goes forward first and then usually goes left or right. I think that's what we're going to see just based off his previous things. But yeah, usually you would see that middle spot taken if, you know, you're running some sort of charger or, yeah, like basically Windstorm Charger to go around and harvest. But Anti-Red favors that forward opening. I'm not really sure how significant that's going to be in this matchup, but Yellow Rush likes having that tile created for them.
Yeah, Antirad is opened up with that every single time, like you mentioned, and I think that's really so that he can respond to the direction of whatever his opponent does. He can move towards whichever way they commit to as his play, rather than going one way and then his opponent going the other. Because Combat Burn, obviously, combat is right in the name. It wants to come out and fight you. And when your opponent goes the other way, you're not able to do that. So he definitely seems like he wants to react to whatever his opponent is doing with this more front center style opening. But we do see Sweety go for the Shaitan Demon here and drop that Sagittarius in the same way that he's done in his matches we've seen before.
Yeah, and come to think of it, this deck can operate like a charger would operate, like a Windstorm Charger, because you have columns training it and you have Flash Wind. So you can pretty much do the same thing that deck does now, moving backwards with that Grimguard simply because Shaitan Demon trades into the Grimguard and trades well. And there, unfortunately, well, no, there was some Gift of Steels in hand. He could have gone for the trade there, but what he's going to do is he's going to let that Shaitan Demon damage Sweety. Because as a burn deck, you love when that happens. This is going to force that Shaitan Demon to have to step out of the way so that Sagittarius can get a shot off.
Yeah, a couple things actually there. Like you said, the Gift of Steel, just like we see Antirad actually played, came down in a way where he could have traded with the Demon. Went for this line because it actually initially blocked the Sagittarius attack, and Sweety just has the perfect response here. Steps out of the way so the Sagittarius can attack, generates that extra Faeria through Kaleem's Prayer, and gets the last Nightmare. And Antirad really punished for the more greedy passive play.
That was complete punishment. There were a lot of different options there, but yeah, Last Nightmare takes out Grimguard plus Gift of Steel. That's 2 cards, 7 Faeria for just Last Nightmare. And now Antirad has to try and find an answer again. It's not by any means over, especially with that Demon on the field, damaging Sweety every turn. That's what Burn loves to see. Get lower. Have lower health, please, because I have lots of ways to do indirect damage to you. However, Sweety, prayer after prayer, and amazing, Antirad says, because that is amazing. Having those 2 prayers for these 2 turns has been great. He's at 8 Faeria as Yellow Rush, 8 Faeria, and with the Flash Wind, he does a little extra damage, gets another Faeria, plays a Windstorm Charger. He even has a Monk, but he's going to hang on to that.
Yeah, as much as we've been talking about how the movement is good for Antirad in this deck with the Flash Wind, the Kaleem's training that we might eventually see him draw into, a Flash Wind right there for Sweety actually allows him to push 5 damage much quicker than Antirad was probably expecting and set up this charger. Sagittarius continues to push, even though it's just 1 damage. It is extra Faeria, like you mentioned, and those Crusaders, whenever they come out for Sweety, if Antirad is able to stabilize the board, are going to be massive and possibly just going to seal the game before that here for Sweety.
Now, Sweety's Yellow Rush has taken a loss this tournament. He did go 3-2 against Zyrokar. So it is possible to beat this Yellow Rush deck, but it is looking so dominating in these past few games. Here will be the Shaitan Brute with the Flash Wind, clearing off the Charger, standing in the way of that Sagittarius. There's still a Demon in his face, and it's guaranteed to do 5 damage to him.
Shaitan Brute is in a good position now where Antirad can push it up aggressive, clear the Sagittarius, and then start to maybe push some orb damage. And by that time, maybe just one attack from the Shed and Brute is enough here with these Grim Guards to do the extra burn damage. So this is actually a lot closer than it's looking right now. That Choking Sand, a very important pickup for Sweety, though.
Oof. And there we go. The Sagittarius just takes a shot on the Brute. Flame Burst in hand. Okay, so we know that Sweety is technically at 10 health just because Demon exists, assuming it's not cleared off, which it might be actually. So think when you're a burn player thinking about how can I get him to a point where I can just finish him off with a Flame Burst, for example. But you're so low health right now, you may actually need to clear the board just so you don't die. Do you think you clear off the Demon here?
I think you have to, just because you're technically dead through the Demon and any other form of haste right now. Any haste and the Fanatic just surviving, maybe you can kind of come back from that spot. But the other part of that is if killing off the Demon with the Shed and Brute also opens up the mountain directly in front of Antirad's orb for a Grim Guard to come down. Now we can see that Sweety has the Choking Sands to counter that, but it looks like a great play right now for Antirad. Oh, chooses not to go for it, and that's just going to be the game, I think.
Yeah, and even if he had cleared that Demon, he would have been at 1 health, which means that Sagittarius would have been able to clear off the Shed and Brute. It was just, there was really no great play, I think, to be made for Antirad at this point. And there we go, Choking Sand onto the Grim Guard. Shaitan Demon gets the finishing blow, and Sweety goes up 1-0 in this best of 5 with Yellow Rush. And Antirad will have to choose an answer, one of which I believe is going to be, okay, so we know that one of his decks is going to be a Gabrian Wishes deck. Now, it's going to be blue-green with 3 wishes. Now, against Yellow Rush, you would think that would be pretty difficult to pull off. However, his other deck is Yellow Rush, so we'll see in a minute which he chose.
Yeah, green-blue isn't necessarily too bad because it does have something like Living Willows, the Flower Silk Fairies, if you're able to get the triggers for the taunt creatures, which Yellow Rush really struggles at punching their way through. We do see Antirad choose the yellow here and gets a great start with this Doomdrake. He's going to be able to contest the Sagittarius as soon as Sweety plays it.
Yellow Rush decks, they're both Yellow Rush, but they have subtle differences. For example, I do believe that this Doomdrake, this Doomdrake is only present in Antirad's deck. Sweety does not choose to run it. There are also many other subtle differences. So this isn't a complete mirror match. These Yellow Rush decks are very different. And the Doomdrake opener is really what you want in this type of deck. If you run Doomdrake, you want it. You want it on the first turn you can play it. With Explore, it puts itself in a great position. Now you're in a spot where you can cover enemy lands with that Doomdrake, form your own deserts. You already have 1 desert made, so Shaitan Demons can come down, even a Roger and Templars. This is a really good start for Antirad against Yellow Rush.
Yeah, it looks very strong. Even after Doomdrake took the nerf down to a 3/4, it still contests so many early creatures. And we see Sweety, just because of the threat of Doomdrake, has to go for a Last Nightmare, which is super inefficient in that spot. And Antirad just so far ahead right now.
That Doomdrake was it did its job just by dying, just by taking a 6 Faeria Last Nightmare. It already accomplished its goal. This Wind Soldier can clear out the Sagittarius, even trade. Calm's Follower can come down now. Damage. After that, he has the option. Templar or Demon, what's he going to choose? It's the Demon.
I'm actually surprised by the Demon there. Although Templar is a little weaker to something like a Wind Soldier as a response from Sweety, just getting that extra damage from the Templar seems so much stronger in that spot. And actually, Sweety does draw the Wind Soldier, so Antirad made the right play, essentially, with the Demon. And realizing he's so far behind, just concedes the game.
That's game 2. That was about 3 seconds long. I think that the Doomdrake opener, the Doomdrake inclusion in Antirad's version of Yellow Rush is really strong if you get it against Yellow Rush. It's suffocating against their land placement. Sweety didn't have a moment to breathe, and Sweety doesn't waste any time. He's going to the next game. And
charging right into it.
Yep, and it looks like it's going to be a green deck, which I believe is actually not just green, but in fact green-red. Yes. This will be a green-red deck.
Green-red here, very strong against yellow. I think if you get the right start, of course, run some things like Ground Shaker, like the Derelict Tower for the extra little bit of damage onto things like the Ordrum Monk, the Kaleem's follower. And then, of course, has these wood elementals that Sweety has in hand for the taunts, which are very important against Yellow Rush as well. So as long as Sweety can play defensively in the right way, he can eventually get to his Crackthorn Beast, and even just one aggressive creature can really set the game against the Yellow Rush here.
And this is exactly what Sweety was talking about in his interview we just did with him, how green-red is oppressive to Yellow Rush, just because of all those one damage sources from Crackthorn Beast, from Derelict Tower if you choose to run it, Ground Shaker, for instance. So traditionally, green-red is very smothering against Yellow Rush, and this is kind of why we saw Yellow fall away from the meta, was when green-red was just the dominating force in the ladder. Now, it's been toned back a little bit. We'll have to see how it fares. Yellow Rush has a lot of ways to deal with this, especially with these choking sands. Now, a preemptive Elderwood Embrace would really go a long way for Sweety, but it'd be a little bit of a gamble.
Yeah, we saw him kind of hover over it there. It is good in this spot because you know that the yellow opponent right now is only on one desert. So this turn, they're not going to be able to play a Last Nightmare and actually clear your wood elemental, guaranteeing that it'll survive against the choking sand. So Sweety definitely wanting to go for that type of play there, to play around the choking sand now, knowing that he has an extra turn. We actually do see the choking sand come down on the far side, so very well played by Sweety, and actually emotes the amazing, making the right read there.
That was an amazing choking sand. Everyone agrees. Antirad now. I'm sorry. Sweety has no playable card. Now he can play a Flame Burst, but of course you're not going to waste that in the face. Looks like it's just going to be an empty turn and passing it back to Antirad, who has a few options with 10 Faeria.
Yeah, this is the spot where Antirad can now go for an aggressive line. The Wood Elemental's moved away from taunting anything coming down, and Antirad can get that Monk in, get the Prayer down, and then decide what he wants to follow up from there. Doomdrake and Templar, very good at what Yellow Rush wants to do, but not very good against this Wood Elemental.
Right. Sweety's going to try and work up towards Crackthorn Beast. There are none in his hand. This is the moment where Antirad has to capitalize on the board state. There's nothing smothering him. There's no taunts in his way. He would love to have a Last Nightmare to draw for this Wood Elemental, which is surely going to move right to try and stop some of the suppression. There's the Crackthorn Beast. There's a Ground Shaker, which takes out that Monk right away and just leaves a 3/2 Templar, but no, it gets Flame Bursted away, and now the board is entirely in Sweety's favor, and there are gigantic units in the way for Antirad to deal with no Last Nightmares in hand.
Yeah, very smart play to go for the Flame Burst to kill off the Templar as well there from Sweety, just because the Wood Elemental wasn't in quite a good enough position to actually taunt everything up if that Templar had survived. And every piece of damage to your orb is very important in this matchup. And now we're going to see Sweety just kind of juggle his creatures back and forth, blocking attack angles with his creatures and the taunt. I actually think he probably goes for a pass here, maybe just going double neutral to set up a Crackthorn Beast.
Yes, and I just checked. Antirad does not run Doomsday in this Yellow Rush list. So, but Sweety doesn't know that. Sweety doesn't know how much he can safely commit. Looks like he's going to commit a decent amount here with these 3 beef units. A Doomsday right now, of course, if Antirad were to play it, would sacrifice, 8 of his Faeria and end his turn. So Sweety might be saying, "Okay, you want a Doomsday? That's fine. I'll just continue on my merry way." Unfortunately, Antirad has very, very poor answers to what he's presented with. He can get one hit on the orb. Oh, just passing.
Yeah, interesting to go for the pass there. I guess because he's going to set up something for the next turn, but not playing Doomsday. It seems like you probably always want to go for something there, and Antirad making a Doomsday read just doesn't play anything there. It doesn't need to in this situation. So looking very bleak for Antirad right now to punch through all of this force and then set back up his haste creature positions.
There's also the mind games. Like, just because the card Doomsday exists, you can benefit from it existing if your opponent doesn't know exactly if you run it or not, which Sweety shouldn't. So it kind of puts Sweety in a tough spot. Should I play around Doomsday or should I not? Antirad has the luxury of sitting back and letting his opponent make that choice. But yeah, I think you're right. What he's really wanting to do is, I guess, wait for some kind of Last Nightmare combo play where he can hit onto the orb, play some Column's Prayer, eventually get your Zealous Crusaders up to where you can play them. He did have an opportunity, though, to get a shot on the orb that I think would have been valuable. You need to get these Crusaders way up high if you want to win this match.
Yeah, the Crusader is a very important one just because red-green doesn't have any direct removal or transform like blue would be able to do to deal with a Zealous Crusader efficiently. They just have big creatures. But if you can get your Zealous up to 7/7, 8/8, and green-red doesn't have anything on the board, they struggle to keep up with that. So it does seem like that was a situation now a couple turns ago, but that anti-red could have gone for even just one hit with the follower or something to get that extra little bit of damage. And now we see Sweety go for the full commit.
And that is a full face damage from that War Storm. Doomsday is really the only answer Antirad can have, and like I said, I don't believe that it is in his deck. At this point, Antirad's options are so limited. That Grove Caller, just the final nail in the coffin almost after that Doomdrake goes down. He has to establish a board, but now he's in the spot where there's a Ground Shaker threatening his life total. So Antirad has to have an answer, and he has to have it very soon. Looks like he's just going to get rid of this Ground Shaker by trading into it with the Monk and a Soul Drain. He's going to have to come up with a longer-term plan than that, though.
Yeah, very interesting to go for that in a spot where the Ground Shaker actually wasn't going to hit the orb on this next turn. But Antirad kind of just delaying as much as possible at this point. Looks like we'll see a Grove Caller and Sweety really turn the tides for the aggression here. Maybe he's making the read that Doomsday doesn't exist in this deck from Antirad.
And this is what Grove Caller allows green to do now. Green used to lack a lot of mobility. Used to be able to gain board control. Of course, there's red in this deck as well. But green and red both used to be able to gain board control very well, and then not too much with it. It would take a long time, and then turns around, and then we just saw a sacrificial Columns Follower, and that was another way of conceding. Unfortunately, actually, I think that should do that. I think if you summon a Columns Follower and you attack into a unit and just to kill it, that should surrender, because, I mean, that's what you're doing. Or you're BMing. I guess it's true, you could be BMing. But anyways, that's it for Yellow Rush. Yellow Rush is out of this best of 5. We'll now see red and green, and I really, really hope what we see from Antirad is what I think you know. You think you know what I hope for.
This is final deck here from Antirad. Green, blue, Gabriel, and it includes 3 wishes. So this could be a game that we see go very late. If red-green from Sweety, he decides to play it a little slower. Antirad's deck is going to play slower and actually keeps Tethra in his opening hand. That's quite interesting against red-green just because you know if you can out-buff them, you can actually take a game very easily.
And this is what Antirad wants to see. He wants to see that control mid-range opening because, like you said, he wants to sit back. He needs time. Antirad always does this. I just don't get it. I mean, it's fine. He knows better than I do, but he always does that opening right in front of his orb rather than to the side, which so many control players favor. We could go on and on for hours about the significance of the difference between the two, but suffice to say, Antirad decides that's what's better. But yeah, this is going to give him time to sit back, get his green-blue going, and yeah, surprise, there's 3 wishes. So if you allow him to sit back long enough to make 2 of each, and there's the 3 wishes right there, to make 2 of each land, deserts and mountain, which he doesn't even use otherwise in the deck. If he has that much time, Antirad's going to be in a great spot, especially because he's going to be drawing from this powerful green-red deck, of which he can utilize most of these multicolor cards.
Yeah, I actually really like the opening here from Antirad. He has that Earthcraft in hand, which he could use to accelerate towards 3 wishes, but he's actually waited until now, where he can actually play Tethra, which is very strong, like I mentioned off the top here. And that looks like that's going to be the play that he starts off with. And you know, Sweety in this matchup has only seen the red-yellow off game 1 and then yellow rush off of game 2. Well, game 2 and game 3. But doesn't really know what Antirad's bringing. All he's seen is these forests so far. Now is the first indication that it's a green and blue deck, or green and anything deck, really. And Tethra is going to be very difficult for Sweety to deal with, I think.
And that Tethra noise scared the crap out of me. I forgot that Tethra makes noise now. Holy cow. But Tethra is here, if you didn't hear it already. And that's an 11/11. Yeah, that green-red's going to have to deal with stat for stat. I was surprised when I was looking at that turn. I was like, oh, he's going to Sturdy Shell here instead of the double harvesting. Well, you know what else can double harvest? A Tethra. Yeah. So at this point, it's going to be Sweety who has to answer this gigantic flying dragon, and Antirad who can now build up towards 3 wishes. And I feel like if he's able to play that 3 wishes, if we get to the point where he plays 3 wishes, he's just going to be in such a great spot.
Yeah, going to still be a little ways away from it. Can go for the Earthcraft. And yeah, as soon as he drew the Sturdy Shell, it did look like he ended up with a couple lines. Could have gone for Sturdy Shell into Earthcraft and started accelerating a different way. Gabriel Enchantress was a great pickup here for Antirad. Could actually go for Sturdy Shell in the bottom right corner, and then immediately Gabriel Enchantress it and have a 5/5 down here, possibly contesting the Axe Grinder from Sweety. But we're going to see Tethra just move out. Might as well attack the orb.
And now, yeah, that Tethra, it's moved from a double harvester into, okay, that's a threat to the face. That's a threat to the orb. That's really a 2-turn clock. Sweety is actually on a 2-turn clock at this point in the game, when Antirad isn't even halfway to his 3 wishes. I guess just now he is. And yeah, like you said, he is going to put that Sturdy Shell in the bottom right, which will defend against the Axe Grinder or whatever else. And this Enchantress can just be a little double harvester for a while Tethra goes to the front lines and tries to win the game.
I love this play from Antirad. Like I mentioned it as a possibility, but what it does here is the Axe Grinder, if it continues to push up for Sweety, either needs buffs or some extra damage to kill off the Sturdy Shell, maybe buffs even so that it can survive. That means that those buffs and removal aren't available for Sweety to use towards Tethra. So Antirad making a great play there to, even though it's an 11-11 and a 5/5, does split his forces essentially. Instead of going more up the board, pulls that little bit back to contest the other side there. So really like this play coming out from Antirad.
So heads up play there from Sweety. He takes Tethra down to 10, and he has 3, 5, 7 damage in hand, plus an Elderwood's Embrace. So you figure 9 damage in hand. Without the 5 damage from the Ground Shaker. Sorry, there's a bunch of math. But basically, he's trying to figure out, I got to kill a Tethra next turn. How am I going to do it? Well, luckily he knows that Antirad probably won't have a movement trick to put Tethra in the spot left of the orb. It's probably going to go right in the middle if it does attack the orb. And he'll have lots of ways to deal with it, especially with Cypher and Ground Shaker out now, without having to use his spells. Meanwhile, Antirad says, okay, well, I'm going to just make another lake so I can Frogify a target. Now, if he Frogifies one of these 2 units up here, the 5/6 and the 5/6 Cypher or the Ground Shaker, that's going to mean Sweety will have to use those events to deal with Tethra, because Tethra must be dealt with or he loses the game. What's interesting to me about this is that Antirad, the fact that his deck has 3 wishes is almost an afterthought at this point. He's basically running a Gabriel Blue deck, and it's just performing well on its own.
Yeah, Antirad actually has a very difficult decision right now, and we can see him kind of struggling with it. Does he go for the Elderwood Embrace and push 13 damage? Oh, he's actually going to Elderwood Embrace the Sturdy Shell. I think that means Tethra doesn't attack the orb here. But I was going to say, could buff Tethra to try to get outside the range of damage and buffs from the 2 creatures up in the top right corner, or could go for Frogify onto one of them and hope that he reduces the power that way. But choosing to go for this line where he reinforces that Sturdy Shell, leaves Tethra where it is, at least for now, wants Sweety to commit some more resources to the board before he really makes a decision.
Yeah, and we know since he made that 3rd lake, he's looking to use that Frogify at some point. I guess maybe he thought he was going to use it that turn, but then decided against it after thinking more. Or maybe it's just because he knows it's going to be the next card he plays, probably. But that means that it's slower to get out 3 wishes. You know, he could have made a different land that turn to build towards that, but I don't think that's in his mind. I think he's thinking, let me deal with the board just with my green-blue, and worst case scenario, I will switch back to trying to play my 3 wishes.
Oh, there's a very interesting play Sweety could have gone for, attacking the Axe Grinder. I think still could actually go for it. Attacking the Axe Grinder into the Sturdy Shell, playing the Sagami Grove Color to move Cypher aggressively, and then Elderwood Embrace onto it and kill off the Sturdy Shell. And Cypher will start to get these buffs. Now, Cypher does get base stats, so it'll only earn 0.5 from the Sturdy Shell. It won't earn this full 7-8 of stats, which would be awesome, but it does put Cypher in a position where he could start pushing orb damage, but I think with the threat of Tethra, it's still too risky at this point.
That Tethra was a big force when it came out in the field. There's a Gabriel Enchantment. Not going to be too useful this turn unless he wants to cycle. But that Tethra came out, it was a big force, but here we see it hanging back, waiting to attack. If Tethra were to just... If he's able to hit the orb once with Tethra, it puts Sweety on that clock. It forces out all of the cards in his hand. Meanwhile, Antirad just loses to Tethra, which was an investment, to be sure. But I imagine right here he's going to play one of his other alternative lands, and it is a mountain. So at this point, you're Sweety. You see green-blue. You're thinking, okay, Gabriel, I can deal with this. Now a mountain comes out. You're like, what the heck? Important to note that Sturdy Shell is locked in there. He's not going to move. He can move backwards, I guess, but an aquatic unit is going to hang back. And now, look, there's the desert. Sweety's like, oh my god, now I know. 3 wishes is coming. Now what do I do? The clock that he feels even more pressure, because now not only is in the clock to lose the game from Tethra, he's on the clock to his opponent playing 3 wishes, at which point he's going to have a huge advantage.
Yeah, the game really slowed down just because this Tethra was so threatening, and Sweety just felt he could, delay and wait until he could get the right amount of value to deal with Tethra. And then, like you mentioned, as soon as you see these other lands, you realize it's wishes, and then the script is completely flipped, because the value that you thought you could get over the course of late game, now you realize your opponent can get over the course of late game, just because wishes will outpace you anyway. Going for the Crackthorn Beast here just to be a bit aggressive. I would expect the Axe Grinder and Cypher's Wrath to kill off the Sturdy Shell here, just because the Crackthorn Beast ends up in a really good position. But maybe this is a situation where Sweety goes for the race at this point and try to set up a 2-turn lethal.
Yeah, he's turning it on, full gas. I think what we're going to see is actually the Axe Grinder trade into the 7/6, the Sturdy Shell, and finish it with a Cypher's Wrath or something. The Crackthorn is in an offensive position. He made that offensive forest, but the only thing he can't put any units on it. You're not going to play a Grove Color on it. And of course, I think what we might even see is, well, maybe an Elderwood's Embrace, but your opponent is blue, so no, you don't want to invest too much. But yeah, here comes the Cypher's Wrath. I think this is pretty clear. You can move the frog down, prepare to do some extra damage. Your opponent's at 16. They are on somewhat of a clock from you, 7 damage if you move the frog down. That's 3 turns still, but really 2 with Cypher's Wrath. It all comes down to what Tethra does and how you react to the Tethra. This is very tough. This is very close, I think, and very hard to make a decision for both players.
I think that had to be Grove Collar from Antirad there to set up a 2-turn lethal by attacking the orb with the Ground Shaker, just because then your opponent's at 10 and you have 10 damage right at the orb. I think having just seen a Frogify as well, because Antirad used a Frogify on Cypher on the previous turn, maybe you have that kind of thought in your mind that your opponent doesn't have one. I think that was exactly the spot where Sweety could have gone fully aggressive, set up the 2-turn lethal, and now with this forces moved away, this gives the opening for Antirad to go for the orb with Tethra.
I think you're right. I think actually Grove Collar was the best play last turn, just because you can't answer this Tethra. There's nothing you can do. It's 14 health now. It was 11. Even then it was tough to do. But if you would have gone face, with that Ground Shaker, you set up lethal. And I feel like that might have been the only chance. And there it is, the 14-14, and that's to the face, and that's 6 health left for you, Sweety. And unfortunately, I think you hit it right in the head there. Not making that Grove Collar play, not hitting it, not hitting the face last turn means he has no lethal this turn and no way to remove Tethra. Without a taunt, he's lost the game. Do you think there's a lethal here? Because there's 6 plus 6.
Yeah,
that's
I think
4
there
away. Elderwood Embrace, Flame Burst.
Yeah, I think if you go Flame Burst and Cypher's Wrath on the Gabriel Enchantress, you can jump your frog down onto that position and attack the orb. Grove Collar moves the Ground Shaker forward, and Elderwood Embrace. 12, 9, 11, 13, I believe.
12 Faeria. Grove Collar comes down. That puts him to 8. He has the 6-7 down there. Elderwood takes it to 8. That takes him to 4 health remaining. He has Flame Burst and Cypher's Hand in hand. Cypher's Wrath can come down onto Tiki Caretaker. There's the Grove Collar. There's the 8 damage. Cypher's Wrath, Piper, and the Flame Burst to finish it off. I can't believe it. I was thinking there was no lethal. Sweety knew all along that he had it. And there we go. That's it. 3-1.
A fantastic lethal find in the end there from Sweety, in a position where we thought, he maybe missed his opportunity.
Yeah, I was thinking, oh man, what a mistake. But who am I to question Sweety, who's won more monthly cups than I have fingers? That's not exactly true, but I felt
was such a dominant force in the monthly cups in the early stages of them, with his 2 wins, like was mentioned previously.
Yeah, and Antirad though did so well too. And I really thought he was going to win that game. I thought he was so close. I wonder if it wouldn't work out better for him if he moved that Tethra in earlier. To hit that orb earlier and put that clock on and force those cards to come out from Sweety that ended up winning the game for him. You'd have to use those Flame Bursts, those Cypher's Wraths That later wouldn't damage your face.
Yeah, those are little decisions. We're going to toss it back over for the analysis, and maybe they'll break it down a little better for us.
Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself, but that was a great series. All right, we'll push it back to the desk, which I'm at.